This episode briefly touches on discussions of racism and anti-Semitism. Listen at your own discretion. It is Saturday, the 16th of November, 2024. My name is Pigeon Rose, and this is my song of the day. Are you sick of me talking about the Tragically Hip yet? Tough shit. Today, we're talking about the song Bobcaygeon by the Tragically Hip. Now, it is day 6 of our Desert Bus week here. Again, obviously I'm recording this in advance. As I'm recording this now, Desert Bus is ongoing, and you can check it out at desertbus.org. But when this episode comes out, will be the day the Desert Bus is likely to end. So I don't know what their total will be like, but it's looking good so far. I mean, they're at 364,000 as I'm recording this. They hit 11 million lifetime last night. It was great. I completely miscalculated like a fool. And Desert Bus actually ended today, which is to say yesterday when you're hearing this. But I'm literally recording this update just moments after Desert Bus ended, and I will talk more about that at the end of the episode. Anyway, the reason I'm talking about this song this week, well, I've mentioned before actually when I talked about the Tragically Hip, is that I originally discovered them through Beej and Cam singing Nautical Disaster on the Crapshoot, and I think I then mentioned how what got me to actually go and listen to their discography was later on Desert Bus 2021, Beej sang Bobcaygeon. Now, he had sang a bunch of Tragically Hip songs going way back to when I first started watching, but I didn't know these songs, so I didn't really pay attention, didn't really strike me in any way. But now that I knew I had some frame of reference for who the Tragically Hip, Beej singing Bobcaygeon, I was like, oh, this is a really good song. I need to listen to this fucking band. So I finally did in 2021. Oh, I think like maybe late 2021, early 2022. Well, I guess it would have been late if it was November, but yeah, I listened to their entire discography anyway and loved it. And so I thought it was only fitting to talk about this song during my Desert Bus week, because of course. Now, actually, in the currently ongoing Desert Bus, he has not sung this song. Beej has, however, sung Courage for Hugh McLennan, Ahead by a Century, and Grace 2. So that's fun. Courage is definitely one I want to talk about on here as well. It's a great one. Anyway, I don't think I need to give you too much of a preface for this one. We're mostly just going to talk about it afterwards. So let's go ahead and listen to it and then come back in a few minutes and talk about it. And that's Bobcaygeon by the Tragically Hip. As I always say with Tragically Hip songs, Gord's delivery is so unique and interesting, the way he sings certain lines. And so, like, there's just certain vocal deliveries that get stuck on my head. I believe they call that stimming. Specifically in this song, the way he goes, like, you know, thought I may be quitting, kind of holds that consonant. Or the, in the middle of that riot. But in particular, the phrase from this song that sticks in my head is that night in Toronto. Whenever I think of Toronto, I think of that. I think of Ace Frehley going, Toronto. I think that was Ace Frehley. Anyway, I think of a few things, but one of the things I think of is that night in Toronto. And I believe there was like a festival thing called That Night in Toronto that the Tragically Hip performed at. Let me see here. Yes, That Night in Toronto is one of their live DVDs. Filmed and directed by Pierre and Francois Lamoureux. Cool. Did they end with Bobcaygeon? No, it was the 9th track. Okay, fair enough. They ended with Blow at High Dow. What a weird one to end with. All right. Anyway, so let's talk about this song, shall we? This song tells a story, and it mentions the town of Bobcaygeon. Bobcaygeon is a real place in Ontario, but it wasn't picked for like any specific like significance to Gord. He just picked it because it kind of rhymes with constellations. That was the only reason it's in the song. But even so, the real place of Bobcaygeon has kind of made it culturally significant to the town. I think there's like signs about it and stuff. And when they held that final concert that was broadcast around Canada, there was a viewing of the concert in Bobcaygeon's main street, and there was like 5,000 people there, which was the largest public event in the community's history, because a lot of people from outside of Bobcaygeon traveled to be there. I nearly said outside. I'm becoming real Canadian talking about the Tragically Hip. They also held a candlelight vigil there after Gord Downie died. So even though this town was just kind of picked because it rhymes, they adopted the song very quickly is what I'm saying, and I enjoy that. The story the song actually tells, though, is a strange one. There's certain details you can pick up objectively, but there's a description of the song on Wikipedia, and it states it like it's fact. I mean, it has citations, I suppose, because it is Wikipedia, but I don't know if it's like canonical or if it's just one interpretation, because there's certainly other interpretations on Genius and other places, but we'll kind of go through it. So Gord often introduced the song as being a cop love song, and in the music video, the male cop's partner is female. The cop is played by Gord Downie in the video, but he also sometimes introduced the song as being about a couple couple of gay cops that fall in love, so God only knows. But the idea of it being a love song involving a cop does make sense for the lyrics. There's also this kind of undercurrent of themes about like racism and anti-Semitism. One of the ways that he introduced the song was, this one asks the question, evil in the open or evil just below the surface? And there's all these other references, like how Rob Baker's guitar in the music video has the "this machine kills fascists" phrase that Woody Guthrie famously had in his guitar. There's like a mention of Aryan twang to the voices. There's references to a riot, perhaps a race riot. A lot of people assume it's referencing the Christie Pitts riot of 1933, but a lot of other people say that doesn't make any sense. And people do bring up how there was a public brawl between the Heritage Front and anti-racist action in Toronto in 1993, just a few years before Danny wrote the song. So it's probably more likely to be that, especially because in the video there's people fighting and one of them tries to like do a Nazi salute before he's tackled. So it makes sense to me that it's more referencing that. Anyway, let's go into lyrics. I left your house this morning about 9:15. Could have been the Willie Nelson, could have been the wine. When I left your house this morning, it was a little after 9. It was in Bobcaygeon. I saw the constellations reveal themselves one star at a time. I do love, by the way, how the song starts with like the do, just the guitar. It really just does sound like a song that you listen to while driving home. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of sound to it. But yeah, I left your house this morning about 9:15. Immediately saying that makes it sound like romance. Like it sounds like you're leaving someone's house after spending the night with them. You know what I mean? And then could have been the Willie Nelson, could have been the wine. So Willie Nelson, famously a singer who I happen to share a birthday with, by the way, fun fact, and also famously a promoter of marijuana. And so him saying it could have been the Willie Nelson, could have been the wine, he's referring to weed. He's saying that like maybe I stayed late because of the weed or the wine. You know, that's what that lyric is. I always specifically think about how like Desert Bus 2021 is when Beej sang Bobcaygeon, and I was like, right, fine, I'll listen to them. Desert Bus 2022, they did an only connect of like a sequence of images, and the first image was a house, the second image was a clock showing 9:15, the third image was Willie Nelson, which meant that the fourth image that they had to guess was wine. And I got it quicker than they did, and I was like, you call yourself Canadians. But anyway, when I left your house this morning, it was a little after 9. It was in Bobcaygeon. I saw the constellations reveal themselves one star at a time. So this is where the place name of Bobcaygeon rhymes with constellations. And he's saying that like they're in Bobcaygeon and he looks up at the stars in the sky, revealing themselves one star at a time. I love that line. But it shows how he's just like looking up at the sky, presumably as the sun sets and the stars come out and reveal themselves one star at a time. Now, Bobcaygeon is not far north of Toronto. Well, apparently about 100 miles northeast. So it makes sense that he would like, you know, spend the night with someone in Bobcaygeon and then have to go back to Toronto. Like they're near enough that you could drive that, you know what I mean? And then the third verse, drove back to town this morning with working on my mind. I thought I may be quitting, thought of leaving it behind. Went back to bed this morning as I'm pulling down the blinds. Yeah, the sky was dull and hypothetical and falling one cloud at a time. So he's driving back to town. He's thinking about work, which, as suggested, he's a cop. So he's thinking about going back to working the police. I thought I may be quitting, thought of leaving it behind. So looking up at the stars in Bobcaygeon has made him reflect in his life and consider quitting his job. And then went back to bed this morning as I'm pulling the blind, the sky was dull and hypothetical and will fall in one cloud at a time. So comparing the skyline in Toronto with the skyline in Bobcaygeon, you know, Bobcaygeon had these beautiful constellations. Here he says the sky was dull and hypothetical, which makes me think like the sky being hypothetical is like it's hidden by smog, you know what I mean? Toronto famously has a smog problem. Like he's saying the sky is hypothetically there, but I can't even see it, right? And fall in one cloud at a time. It's an interesting kind of mirror back to the first bit. And then we get the bridge. That night in Toronto with its checkerboard floors, riding on horseback and keeping order restored, till the men they couldn't hang stepped to the mic and sang, and their voices rang with that Aryan twang. So, when he says it's checkerboard floors, this is assumed to be a reference to the Horseshoe Tavern, which is a place in Toronto, which apparently is the place that they have performed at more than any other place, and it famously has a checkerboard floor, so it's referring to the specific gig space in Toronto, just to place it in a specific place, you know? And so, riding on horseback and keeping order restored, one would assume it's referring to, you know, being on horseback, like a cop being on horseback and trying to keep order, although it is weird that you would be doing that at a gig, but anyway. And then the men they couldn't hang. So again, people have arguments about this, but Wikipedia says that it's a reference to the British band The Men They Couldn't Hang, or a folk punk group. And that might sound weird that they're being referenced, but specifically when it says their voices rang with that Aryan twang, it is probably referring to their song Ghosts of Cable Street, which is a song about the Cable Street riots in 1936. And again, this is like a I believe also a neo-Nazi thing. So it's kind of talking about all of these different riots and neo-Nazi clashes and Nazi clashes. I mean, if it's in the 30s, it's just actual Nazis. And just a really interesting kind of amalgamation of all these different images of the same thing, you know? And then the final bit, I got to your house this morning just a little after 9, in the middle of that riot, couldn't get you off my mind. So I'm at your house this morning just a little after 9, because it was in Bobcaygeon where I saw the constellations reveal themselves one star at a time. So the start of the song is him leaving the house, going back to work, thinking about quitting his job, and reflecting on the specific riot that he witnessed. And so then the end of the song is him saying that he goes back to her house and how during that riot he could do nothing but think about her. Well, it doesn't have to be her, but the partner that he's singing to, right? Then I'm at your house this morning just a little after 9 because it was in Bobcaygeon where I saw the constellations. So he's saying like, I'm back here because this is where I saw the sky and it was beautiful, and I don't want to go back to Toronto and see the shitty sky and the shitty people. I feel like is a fair reading of this song, and I really love it. It's just such a lovely song, despite like all the wild themes in it. Like the vibe of it is really nice. I love the feel of it, you know. Like I said, it just feels like driving home, you know. Just that whole line about the constellations revealing themselves one star at a time is just such a lovely line, and I love this song, and I hope you do too. That's going to be it for this episode. Again, please check out Deserbus at deserbus.org. By the time you're hearing this, if you're not listening to this on the day it came out, Deserbus is probably already over. But yeah, I just have to thank Beej for introducing me to the Tragically Hip properly twice. So like I said at the start of the episode, Deserbus is now over, and they raised more money than they ever have before in a single year. They raised 1.25 million this year, which is incredible, and I donated quite a bit of my money to that, which I wasn't planning to do, but here we are. I'm just so happy for them. I'm so happy for the charity they're supporting, for all the kids that'll help, and I thank you for indulging me for this week of talking about Deserbus. I'm still going to be talking about it tomorrow, don't you worry. But yeah, that's the update. And that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment down below, tell me what you think, tell other people about this show. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
Break it down.
He just picked it because it kind of rhymes. What the fuck? What is happening over there? Anyway, comparing the skyline in Toronto with the skyline in Bobcaygeon,